So managing users. First thing, do we understand what is a user in Salesforce? Every user is identified by a username, a password and a single profile. So every user in a Salesforce has one username, one password, one single profile, right? So as I told you earlier, when you approach salesforce.com, they will ask you that how many users will use Salesforce within your company. Then you tell them that okay, let's say 10 or 12 users will use the Salesforce, and they give you that number of licenses. They charge you on that basis and they give you that number of licenses, right? So the number of licenses that you procure from salesforce.com, based on that you can create your own users, right? So that is the thing. So as you see it here, every user is identified by a username, a password and a single profile. Okay, now what is that profile? A profile username and password we understand. So far we have talked about username and password and we understand. What is a profile? The profile determines what task the user can perform. Okay, what data they see. So what task the user can perform, that depends on the profile. What data they can see, that also depends on the profile. What they can do with the data, that depends on the profile, right? What data they can see and what they can do with the data. What they can do with the data means whether they can edit the data, create the data, delete the data. So that all depends on the profile. Okay, so that's about a user. The profile, I'll talk about profile a little more in details a little later. Now viewing and managing users. Where do you go to see the users and manage them? To view and manage users, you just have to go to setup, manage users, and then go to users. Okay, so give me one moment. Okay, to view and manage users, I think you all can see my screen again. Right. To view and manage users, you just need to go to setup. Under administrator, you have the option of manage users and then click on users. Alright, so this is the place where you can see all the users listed. If you plan to create new user, you can click on this and create a new user. Right, so just put all the details. So this is where we create the users. So for viewing and manage users, you have to go to setup, manage users. Adding a single user is an option, as I showed you just now, that you can just go to the setup, manage users and click on new users to create one user. You also have an option of adding multiple users at a time. Sometimes it happens that you have to add multiple users, as a 10, 20 at a time. You have an option of adding multiple users. The same navigation, you just have to, instead of clicking on new user, you saw there was an option of add multiple users. You have to click on add multiple users. So the moment you click on add multiple users, let's see what do we get. See, here we have new user option as well as add multiple users. So if you say add multiple users, you have the option of selecting the license. Which license do you want to use, and whatever is the number of licenses. Now you just have one license left. If you want to add chatter free users, then you have multiple licenses available. So you can add as many users you want, add more users. So when you try to add multiple users, then Salesforce will just ask you for the first name, last name, email, username, that's it. It will not ask you for too many details. And you can quickly put it for the first user, second user, third user, fourth user, and this way you can add multiple users at one go. All right. Okay. Editing user is again simple. You just have to select the user whose information you want to edit. Click on the edit button beside that. user's name, that's fine. So click edit next to user's name and then you can go and edit. So at any point of time, if you feel like editing the email ID or the username or the phone, tax, whatever details, you can go and edit, right? So what we need to understand here is that this user information which is getting stored, this is also an object. We understand what is an object, right? Standard object, custom object. So users is also an object at the backend, and all this detail is being maintained there. And these users are also like records. This is a standard object and this is maintained by Salesforce. You did not create the object, but this is also an object, right? So that is what I want you to understand, because at later point of time we might need this concept of calling the user fields on our coding side or somewhere. So just wanted you to understand this thing. Okay, the username must be unique across all Salesforce organizations. So what you have to understand is the username that you are actually the username that you give to any of your users has to be unique across all Salesforce orgs, not just in your organization. It has to be unique across all Salesforce organizations. So that is again pretty much logical, because it's a web-based login and everyone is logging into the same platform, so it has to be unique across all Salesforce organizations. And it's more like an email ID, like an email ID has to be unique across the globe. So that way. A username must use the format of an email address, but doesn't need to be a real email address. This is something which we talked about while creating your developer editions as well. So the username has to be in the form of an email address, but it does not have to be an email address. So it does not have to be a real email address, but the format should be of email address. You cannot delete a user, so you can only create a user. If you would have noticed, this is a common question that is asked a lot of times during your interviews and all those things. Can you delete a user? So you see, there is no delete option. So only thing that you can do with a user is you can create users. You cannot delete any of the users. So Salesforce does not allow you to delete any user. Okay. And for example, now you might be thinking that if someone has left the company, then what do you do with that user? Let's say Hemant works for the company and then he resigns. Now he is no more a user in the company. Then what do we do with that? We just make that user inactive. You see this active option? You just have to go and make the user inactive. So a user will be active or inactive. He will never be deleted whatsoever. Okay. Yeah, you can deactivate a user. So when you deactivate a user, that user does not consume the license. Fine, it's more like a deleted user only who is not being used, but you cannot delete the user. And there is a very valid reason for that, because you will have a lot of records. Let's say there is a user in the company. Even if the user leaves the company after some time, let's say after 6 months, there will be a lot of records for which that user is the owner, right? So those records you do not see, you surely do not want to delete those records. For example, if Priyanka works in a company for 6 months and during those 6 months she works in the customer support team, and there are certain cases which she has worked on in the 6 months, right? So whenever she leaves the company will not want to delete all those cases, right, for which Priyanka is the owner. So that is for the reason why Salesforce does not allow you to delete the users. So it says, okay, deactivate the user, keep the users within your organization, at any point of time, at a later point of time, if you feel like activating the user again, you have that option. If you don't want, just keep it as deactive, inactive user, and that will not even consume the license, right? So that is the thing. So we have understood about users. How do we create users, manage users, edit them, multiple user adding, and what are the specific informations about user. We have talked about that. Now let's go and talk about securing the data access. Okay, so once we understand the users, how to create and all, now the next thing that we are going to discuss is how do we control the data access to the users. Okay. So there are different levels of security which you can put. As I told you that the data or the control that we are talking about, the access control that we are talking about has to be at all the stages, right? You have to control access at every stage, right? So for that there are different levels of security which we talk about in Salesforce. The first is the object level security. Okay. Object level security can be done through permission sets and profiles. Okay. Object level security means restricting access at an object level, that who will see which object, who will not see the object. Okay. So you can prevent a user from seeing, creating, editing or deleting any instance of a particular type of object such as a lead or opportunity, right? So sometimes you might need to control the access at an object level. The example that I was giving earlier, customer support team do not need access to lead, or the sales team does not need access to the cases. So this is an object level security that you need to put. Okay, we'll talk about this. And this is done through permission sets and profile. So we'll talk about permission set and profile. Field level security. Okay. Field level security, as the name suggests, it's at the field level. So you may want users to have access to an object but limit their access to individual fields in that object. So this can be the situation sometimes, that you want the user, the first scenario is you don't want the user to have the access to the entire object. So that's object level security, restrict the access to the object itself. So that is one thing. Sometimes you might want the person to have access to the object, or you might want the user to have access to the object, but you want to restrict the access to one of the fields. For example, you want the user to see the contact, but you don't want them to see the email field in the contact. So one or two fields can be little confidential kind of things. You don't want the user to see that. Okay, so that is field level security. So field level security control whether a user can see, edit and delete the value for a particular field on an object. So this is controlled more at a field level. And the third thing is record level security. What is that record level security? You may want to configure access settings for the actual records themselves. Okay. Sometimes what you want to do is you want to control the security at a record level. Let's say we all work in the sales team, 4 or 5 of us, we all are in the same sales team. Okay. We all work on opportunity table. We all have access to opportunity table, and we all have access to all the fields in the opportunity table. But we all may have our own opportunities. Let's say I have 10 opportunities, Hemant has 10, Priyanka has 10, Chetan has 10. So all of us have 10 opportunities. Now, sometimes the company wants you to have access only to your opportunities, the one that you own. The company wants you to have access to those opportunities only. They do not want you to have access to all the opportunities or something like that, right? So that is where we are talking about our record level security, right? So controlling the access at the record level. Record level security lets you give users access to some object records but not others. Okay, so some records will be accessible to the user on that object and some will not be accessible. How that will be controlled? Through sharing model. So we'll talk about sharing model. So we can see three things here: permission set, profile, permission set, profile, and sharing. So three things: permission set, profile, and sharing. Right. So what are these three things? We are going to talk about that. We have understood that these three types of security are, we need to implement on Salesforce as far as our users are concerned, and these are the three different ways of doing that: permission set, profile, and sharing. Three things. So these are the three tools that we have to impose these security things: data security or the data access security thing. So let's go and understand. So before I move into the next slide, please let me know if anyone has any question here. So far we are clear: object level, field level, and record level. So now let's go and understand what is the mechanism to control all these levels of security access. So first of all, we will talk about user permissions and access. So let's understand the user permission and access. User permissions and access settings specify what users can do within an organization, specified in user profiles and permission sets. So this permission access is specified within profiles and permission sets, and this determines what the user can do in Salesforce. Every user is assigned only one profile. So every user in Salesforce has one profile. If you would have noticed, I'm not very sure if you got a chance to come to your user record and look into it. So if you see it here, there's a profile for this user. Every user has a profile. Okay, system administrator, chatter field user. So this way every user will have a profile. Okay. Every user is assigned only one profile but can also have multiple permission sets. Profile will be one, permission sets can be multiple. So permission and access through profiles and permission sets. So what is controlled through this permission and access? Okay, what all things are controlled? Assigned apps. The apps that a user gets to see is controlled through this. Tab settings, the tabs that a user can see on Salesforce. When you see the tabs, what all tabs a user will see, that depends on this permission and access. Record types, okay, which record types are available to that user, that depends on this. Page layouts, okay, the different pages that are available to the user. Object permissions, field permissions. So object level security, what we were talking about in the previous slide. Field level security. User permission, application and system user permission, what the user can do on this application and not. Apex classes, Visual Force pages, desktop client access, if any. Okay, so all these things are controlled at through this permission and access. Okay, and these are controlled through profile and permission sets. So these are the two things which we are going to talk about: profile and permission set. These profile and permission set, basically control this part. What all apps the user gets to see, what tabs they see, what record types, page layout, objects, fields, user, Apex classes, Visual Force pages, the permissions that the user has, login hours, login IP ranges, everything is controlled through profile and permission set. Right? So as I showed you your profile, so your profile determines what all access in terms of these things you will have on the Salesforce. Okay. So now let us start with the profile thing. We have understood what a profile controls basically. Now let us understand what a profile is and how do we create a profile and everything. Okay. So profile contains user permissions and access settings that control what users can do within their organization. So this profile basically controls the user permissions and access settings, okay, which determine what the user can do on the organization. In Contact Manager Group and Professional Edition organizations, you can assign standard profiles to users. So we have seen different editions, right? So in these editions, in the Contact Manager Group and Professional Edition, in these three editions, you can only go and assign the standard profiles to the users. You cannot create your own profile. So you always have to work with the Salesforce defined profiles. Okay. So it's more like, again, while creating the objects, we talked about the concept standard object, custom object thing. Same concept is applicable here also when we are talking about profiles. Salesforce by default provides you some profiles which are called standard profiles. Okay, and in some of the editions they allow you to create your own profiles as well. So in these editions, Contact Manager, Group and Professional, if you remember, you just have the option of using the standard profile. You have no choice of creating your profile. Okay, your own customized profile and all those things cannot be done. So what we see here is in these three editions, you can assign standard profiles to your users, but you cannot edit the standard profiles. Standard profiles you cannot edit, or you cannot create custom profiles. So you just have to work with the profiles which have been defined by Salesforce. Okay. However, in Enterprise, Unlimited and Performance Edition and Developer Edition organizations, you can use standard profiles or create, edit and delete custom profiles. Fine. So for these editions, you have the choice of working either with the standard profiles what Salesforce has given, or create or delete the custom profiles. Okay. For standard profiles, only certain settings can be changed. So that's fine. So as we understand, basically on Salesforce, on the standard things, what we have seen that we cannot edit the standard things to a great extent. Only certain things on the standard profiles can be changed. Okay, just give me 1 second. Hello. Yep. Okay. So yeah, so we are talking on the profile thing. So we have understood that there are standard profiles and custom profiles, and there are different for different editions we have the option of using standard or custom profile. So if you are using any of these editions, the Contact Manager, Group and Professional Edition, your life is pretty simple. You just have to take a profile which has been given by Salesforce and assign it to the users. That's it. You don't have to do too many things. But in case you are working with an Enterprise, Unlimited, Performance Edition or Developer Edition, then you have that option of creating your own profiles, or you have that option of editing the custom profiles. So that is where you actually go and edit the profile, access, permissions and everything. Okay. So let's go and see how do we create profile and how do we control the access, permissions and everything for the profile. Okay. So where do we see the profiles? Same navigation, no changes, same place. Go to setup, manage users. Under manage users, this time you have to go and click on profiles. So this is where we have all the profiles. Okay, these are all the profiles that you have. These are all standard profiles. Okay, a few of them are custom. 3 custom profiles are there. By default they have given 3 custom profiles. Other everything is standard profile. I was just telling you about standard and custom profile, right? So the system administrator profile that you just saw that was assigned to this user is also here. Solution manager. Okay, click on next. There's some profiles here. System administrator, standard user, there's that, right? So there are some of the standard profiles already available. You have the option of creating new profile. Okay, or you can go and edit the standard profile also. Okay, but the changes that you can make on a standard profile are very few changes that you are allowed to make on the standard profile. You cannot make big changes on the standard profile. So let's take this system administrator profile and try to edit this. So click on edit. So what all things I told you that a profile can do: app setting, tab settings, what apps will the user see and all, right? The moment you click on the profile edit, you will see first thing is custom app settings. Out of the entire list of applications, what all applications should be available to the users under the profile. Okay, so let's say you don't want the users of this profile to see these applications. You just want them to see PMS, project management application. So you should remove access from all other apps. Here we have a long list of applications. If you remove the access from all the applications and just give access to one application, then you see what happens here. See, that menu is gone because the user just needs access to one application, and there is no point of having the drop down here, right? So a lot of times what happens is you will work in this kind of a scenario. So you might not have the drop down. If you are working in the sales team or you are working in the marketing team and your system administrator has given you access to only one application, at that time you will not have this drop down menu. Or if you are working as an administrator or developer, you will see your users do not have access to this menu because they might just have access to one application, right? So I told you this thing, right? Controlling security or controlling access at every level. Application, tab. So you see how that application access has been controlled here. The user just has access to one application. You can go and give access to one more application. Let's say give the access to sales application as well. Save it. Now you see PMS and sales, other applications are not there. Now whatever changes I am making on this profile, why I am able to see these changes here? Because this user that we are talking about, the user who is in context, has a system administrator profile, and I am making changes on this profile. If you go and make changes on standard user, then you will not be able to see the changes right here because that's a profile which is not applicable to this user. So this is something that I want you to understand, right? So we have different profiles, and that profile is given to the user. Got it? So in simple words, a profile is collection of permissions. Okay, so a profile is a collection of permissions. We create a profile or we take a standard profile, assign it to the users. Okay, so depending on the profile that the user has, they get the control to the whatever they can see, what they can edit, what they can delete, all that stuff. Fine. So now similarly, the way you can edited the app setting, the same way you can go and edit the tab setting also. See, all the tabs, the standard as well as the custom tabs are listed here. You just have to go and define which all tabs are should be available to the user and which all tabs should not be available to the user. So this is what you have to go and define here in the tab settings. which tab should be visible, which default on, which ones are default off, which are hidden. Everything needs to be defined. Got this thing? The default on, default off, tab hidden, everything needs to be defined here. Alright. So this is about our tabs and app settings. Okay. Further, if you scroll down, after apps and tab settings, so now the difference between this default on, default off and tab hidden. Tab hidden means the user with the profile will not see the tab at all. Default on means the user will get to see the tab on the tab panel. Default off means will not see the tab on the panel. He'll need to click on this button to see it. Okay, so 3 levels of access for tab. Default on is the user will see it on the panel. Default off means he will not see it on the panel, but he can see it. He can view the tab inside this button, all tabs button. And the third option is tab hidden. So tab hidden is where the user does not see the tab at all. Fine. So that is the thing. And after that, if you scroll down further, you will find that there are a lot of other permissions like admin permissions, the general user permissions. Nothing is editable. You see, there is no edit option here. So this is the restriction of the standard profile. Because this is a standard profile, you cannot edit these things. Then comes the object permissions. If you scroll down further, you will find object permissions. Object permission means which object this profile can read, create, edit, delete, or so that permission is also restricted. I mean, not editable, because this is a standard profile. If we take a custom profile instead of the standard profile, then we'll see that those options are editable. I'll show you. So we saw that there are 3 custom profiles by default here, right? So let's go to any of the custom profile and click on edit. So on the custom profile, you see everything. You have the option of controlling these things also. Standard object permissions, custom object permissions, this is also editable, right? So you have the option of controlling object level security also here through the profile. You cannot make changes on the standard profile, but what we have to understand is this object level permission is also controlled through profile. So your profile will define whether you can create records on a particular object or not. See that create permission, if it is given on your profile, then you can create records there. Sometimes you might not want some users to be able to create records. Sometimes you do not want them to delete the records. Remove the delete permission. So your delete permission, create permission, edit permission, all these things depend on the profile. So everything is defined on your profile. Clear on this? So how we are controlling permissions here, and we also have an option of creating a new profile. In case you feel that okay, you cannot work with the profiles which are given here, you need something really different which is not available here in any of these profiles, or your requirement is not available, then you just have to go and create a new profile. So that is what we have to do then. Okay, so this creating new profile option is available to you only if you are working as we saw it here. So only in these editions, Enterprise, Unlimited and Performance Edition, you have that choice of creating new profile. If you are working in these editions, then you just have to manage with the standard profiles. Okay, so your life will be a little easier and a little difficult as well if you are using these editions, because if you are using these contact manager group or professional edition, then what you will have to do, you just will have your standard profiles. You will have to go and see the standard profiles and figure out that okay, which is best suited for your users. What kind of access you want to give to the user. Go and see the standard profiles and then decide which profile you need to give to them. Right. But in the case of an Enterprise Unlimited and Performance Edition, you have the choice of creating your own profile. So if you don't want to spend too much of time into going and seeing what all profiles you have and what all permissions are allowed on that profile, you can straight away go and create a new profile. So your life becomes a little easier there. Got this thing? So that's about the profile thing. So what do we understand with this profile? Simple basic definition of a profile is collection of permissions. So if you just have to define it very simply, very easily, you have to understand it. Collection of permissions which is assigned to the users. The user gets his permissions through the profile. Fine. So there are standard profiles, custom profile. These three editions do not have custom profile option, but these three editions have the custom profile option. And the settings or the access that you control through profile are these. This. Yeah. What is controlled through profile? The permission and access, assigned apps, tabs, record types, page layouts, object permissions, field level permissions, user permissions, Apex classes, Visual Force pages, desktop client access. All these things are controlled through your profile. Okay. So all these settings or all this access will be controlled through your profile. Right. So you do not actually go to a user and make changes on the user. Let's say your management wants you to, for example, we have a user here called Chetan. Now Chetan is a part of sales team. You get instruction, you are the administrator, you get an instruction from the management saying that Chetan should not have access to accounts. He should not be able to see accounts. Now you don't have to go to that particular user Chetan, you just have to go to the profile of that user. So you will go to the users, see what profile he is using, go to the profile that he is using and go and edit the permissions on the profile. The moment you click, control the permissions on the profile, it will automatically be taken care of for the user, right? And the other thing that you have to consider here is, the moment you do that, it will automatically affect other users also who are using the same profile. It will affect the other users as well, right? Because if Chetan is using a profile which I am also using and you go and make changes on the profile, then what will happen? That permission that you have restricted has got restricted on the profile. So every other user who is using the same profile will get affected. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. Clear? Please let me know if we have any questions here. So now this part we have understood, and I also told you about this scenario, the one that we were just discussing, that when you restrict some permission on the profile, then every user in the profile, every user who is using that profile gets affected, right? So is there a way, now you must be thinking that is there a way that we can actually control some access only for that particular user and not for the entire profile? Sometimes you might want to just go and control some access or give some access to one user and not to that entire profile. So 5 of us might be using the same profile, but Hemant is one person who is working on one additional project and he needs some additional access. Not everyone in the profile, just one user in the profile. So in that case we use other concept which is called permission set. So profile is good to take care of permissions and all those things for the groups, but in case you want to control something at an individual level, then you will use a permission set. Okay. Now what is a permission set? Permission set is also the same thing. Permission set is also collection of setting and permissions. The only difference between a profile and a permission set is profile is used for all the users who are using the profile. Permission set can be done for individual user. Okay, so this permission set is basically used for defining exceptions on the profile. If 5 people are using the same profile, one user out of those 5 needs some additional permissions. So we cannot put that permission on the profile, because if we put it in the profile, then everyone will get to see it. So that additional permission can be given to that user through the permission set. Okay. So permission set is a collection of settings and permissions that gives users access to various tools and functions. Permission sets extend users' functional access without changing their profile. So this extends the functionalities available to the user without changing the profile. Without changing the profile, you can just extend the access of the user through permission set. Users can have only one profile. Any user can have only one profile, but they can have multiple permission sets. The profile will be one, so it's more like a base profile that they have, and on top of them, on top of that, they can have multiple permission sets. Okay, so like for example, for your mobile calling and all, you have a base plan, and on top of that, you can have some special top-ups and all those things. So permission set is more like that. Okay, so where do we see the permission sets? You see it here only under setup, manage users, permission sets. Okay, you can go and create permission set. So permission set needs to be created. There are no standard permission sets available. Let's say we all use a profile where we do not have access to accounts. For example, all 5 of us are in the same team, same profile, but we do not have access to accounts. Hemant wants to access account because he is working on a special project. Okay. Now, how will the administrator resolve this issue? 5 people, same profile. Okay. Now let me write it so that becomes easy for you. Let's say there are 5 users. All of them have same profile, or let's say sales profile. Okay. Out of these 5 users, 3 users, let's say, okay, Hemant is one user who needs additional permission. Now what happens, because this guy Hemant needs additional permission, for that reason what you have to do, there are few options that you have. If you start thinking as an administrator at this point of time, you will have few options. Either give access to the sales profile, whatever additional permission he needs. But if you put that permission in this profile, then what will happen? Other 4 users will also have that permission which you do not want. Okay. Other option that you can think of is create one more profile for Hemant. Okay, create one more profile for that user. But the challenge with that is, there are 2 challenges if you create one more profile. One challenge is you might end up creating a lot of profiles like this, which will ultimately make your system complex. Other thing is that this user, the profile that we are talking about, if you are talking about creating the profile, we just saw in the previous slide, we discussed that contact manager, group edition and professional edition do not have the option of creating new profiles. Now in those editions, you do not even have a choice of creating a profile. Okay, and for other editions where you can create a profile, you will not do it because you don't want to create too many profiles and make your system a little complex kind of thing and all, right? So that is the thing. So based on these requirements, now what we have to do, we just will decide, or we will just go and give access to the, we'll just go and create, we'll just go and give the profile to the user and we will create the permission set there. Fine. Clear on it? Please let me know if you have any questions or doubts so far. So we just can go and create a permission set here, put a few permissions on this permission set and then assign it to the user. So let's do one thing. For today we will just keep it till here. We will do, we'll create a permission set in our tomorrow session and we will see how to assign that to user. Okay. I'll need to get into the other session now.